Thank you so much for joining us today. It's about 12 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. This is our Friday federal update, and we have our special guest, Carly Bari, who's a partner specialist for the New York Regional Census Center, part of the US Census Bureau. We're so happy to have Carly here with us today. So our focus is going to be on the census today. So I know many of you are familiar with the ARC. We are an umbrella organization with 17 chapter affiliates, and the ARC of Mass has the largest network advocating with and serving people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. Our mission is to enhance the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autism, and their families. And we fulfill this advocacy through community supports and services that foster social inclusion, self-determination, and equity across all aspects of society. So for today's agenda, I'm just going to give a very brief update on the fourth COVID-19 package that has moved on to the Senate. And then we'll go right into our 2020 census update with Carly. And then we'll open it up at the end for questions for everyone. So I just wanted to reiterate that the $3 trillion fourth COVID-19 stimulus package, which is the HEROES Act, HR 3600, it passed the House last Friday, May 15th, and it's now moved on to the Senate for review. So we anticipate some changes that may happen in the Senate, which means it would bring it back to the House. And so it's just a longer process than former COVID-19 packages. We want to make sure that we keep the many crucial priority provisions that I went over last week that support the disability community from being negotiated or narrowed down in the Senate. So it's really important that we continue your great advocacy using our We Are Essential campaign, which I'll show you in the next slide. So it's just a really critical time that we're contacting our senators to pass this bill and focusing on these top priorities, which are dedicated funding for Medicaid, home and community-based services, personal protective equipment for direct support professionals, paid leave for all caregivers, not just parent caregivers, and making sure that the economic impact payments are for all people with disabilities. So that includes people that have been claimed as dependents by someone else's tax returns. So those are our top priorities that we've been advocating for all along and are included in the House bill. And we just want to make sure that they stay on through the Senate's revisions. So the We Are Essential campaign, as you guys are well aware of, using the ARC story collection tool is a really great resource. Using the sample tweets and images that are provided by the ARC of US for the We Are Essential campaign, and then using the ARC's action alerts to call, email, or tweet your senators. And we encourage you to share with family members outside of Massachusetts because, you know, we know that Senator Warren and Senator Markey are really great advocates for the disability community, and they've been, you know, really incredible along, especially during this COVID-19 crisis. So, you know, we want to keep reminding them that how important it is to keep these provisions in for the HEROES Act, but we also want to make sure that, you know, our family members and friends in other states are reaching out to their senators as well. So as I mentioned, Carly Bari is going to talk about the census today. I just wanted to let you guys know that the Massachusetts self-response rate is up to 62%, which is great. And we're still ranked 20th in the United States. We want to make sure we're still doing, you know, our outreach and our due diligence in getting everyone to fill out the census. And just remember, this is the information that the ARC of Mass is a Census Questionnaire Assistance Center. So we're here and ready to answer your questions. So I'm gonna hand it off to Carly. You ready, Carly? Not sure what happened. We may have lost Carly. I don't see her on.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, my name's Francesco. I'm with the Massachusetts Developmental Disability Council. I'm one of their council members, and I'm a self-advocate living with a developmental delay and a learning disability. I just wanted to know if, for the next stimulus package, what are they proposing, like what amount for each individual person?
You mean for the stimulus payments are 12?
Yeah, because
Yeah, they're typically $1,200 for each individual.
not the 2,000 that they were originally proposing for.
No, it's the 1,200 for each individual, and then it's 2,400 for a couple.
Okay, and are they including people that are on SSI, SSDI, and all that?
Yes, that is happening, and that's happening right now. People that are on SSI should be getting their economic stimulus payments automatically. They don't need to do anything. They don't need to fill out any forms or file tax returns. But if the person is an SSI recipient and they're claimed as a dependent by another person, like their parents,
Yep.
then that is prohibiting them currently from getting their economic stimulus payments. So that's something that is in the House version of the HEROES Act, and I hope that stays in the Senate. So that's part of what we're advocating for.
So what I want to know is, like, what I'm trying to say is this: are we talking about the second one round, or is this just the second package that's coming out?
So it's technically it's the fourth package, and that is what's currently being debated on in the Senate.
Okay.
But if you are an SSI recipient and you are not claimed as a dependent by anyone else, then you should be receiving your economic stimulus payment soon.
Yeah, I got my first one, but I was just wondering about the second one. I wasn't sure what's going on it, because I've seen so many like YouTube things, and it's like I don't know what to believe.
Yeah, no, I think for this, if there is a second round, it would be after this fourth stimulus package.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, I think Carly's back. Are you back, Carly? Looks like you're on. Carly, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Can you hear me now, Ellen?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes.
Sorry, I got bumped off the webinar. I'm back.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay. So my name is Carly Bari, and I'm a partnership specialist. I work out of the center, but I live here locally. I live in Concord, Massachusetts. So I'm just going to give a real quick overview of the census, and then we can talk about COVID-19 updates and kind of some changes to our timeline. So the Census Bureau is the largest statistical agency in the United States. We are the leading source of quality data about the nation's people and economy. And we actually run 130 surveys between each of the decennial census. So a lot of people wonder what we're doing. And we are very busy doing several different surveys. And this slide just shows a list of some of those.
Yes, please.
Next slide, Ellen. So we mentioned that just because it's good to be survey aware and to know that maybe you've already been in touch with someone from the Census Bureau, or maybe you've already been visited by someone in the past for a different survey. And it's just important to recognize that it's important to fill out every survey that you get from the Census Bureau. It's also important to note that your town or city census is separate than the decennial census. So this year you should have received both your town and or city census and the federal census. We also have this hotline to report any scams or frauds that you might run into, and Ellen has slides, and I think she'll post this webinar too, so you have that. So the goal for the 2020 census is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. It is mandated by the US Constitution that we conduct this census every 10 years. The first one was in 1790. And the reason for doing it is to determine our representation and our funding. So the tagline for the census this year is that it's safe, easy, and important. Next slide. So it's important because it determines the number of seats in the House of Representatives for each state. It also defines congressional and state legislative districts, and then it determines how $675 billion in federal funding is allocated each year. That's for infrastructure and social services. So some of those social services are listed here on this slide. Highlights include Medicaid, SNAP, WIC, Section 8 housing, and the list goes on. What's really critical is to understand that these numbers are the numbers we're going to use for the next 10 years. So if we're undercounted now, we'll be underfunded and underrepresented for the next 10 years. Next slide. And then it's safe. So the Census Bureau operates under Title 13, which is a federal law that protects everyone's individual data and keeps it confidential. And what that means is that we cannot share any individual's data with any other government agency, including the FBI or ICE, or anyone else for that matter. So we cannot share it. If we were to share that data, we could face a 5-year prison sentence, a $250,000 fine, or both. And every Census Bureau employee, including myself, takes a lifetime oath to protect everyone's individual census data. So the only thing that is shared publicly is compiled statistics. And then finally, the census is easy. So many of you may have already completed your census. This year was the first year you could respond online, by phone, or by paper. And the form is quite short. It's about 10 questions per person, including name, age, date of birth, race, Hispanic origin, gender, tenure, and relationship within the home. So is the home filled with roommates or mom, dad, brother, sister, etc. To look out for scams and fraud, there's some things we'll never ask for, and that includes your social security number, money, or your bank account or credit card information. And it's also important to note during an election year that we are in no way associated with any political campaign. So if you ever see anything that has the census in relation to an election or a campaign, that's could be a flag for a scam or a fraud. Next slide, please. The other great thing we have this year is a language support program. So online and by phone, you can respond in these 12 non-English languages. Online, you can select the language that you want to respond in and toggle back and forth with English if that's helpful to you. Next slide. And then on the phone, each one of these languages has a specific phone number to call so that people don't have to spend a lot of time on a phone tree. And this slide lists all the numbers for each one of the languages. These phone lines are available from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. here on the East Coast. So lots of availability. This is a really good option for people who might not feel comfortable online or are not very tech savvy, or elderly folks who might not have an online option available to them. Next slide. And then in addition to those 12 non-English languages, we have additional online support for up to 59 non-English languages that are listed here. And that means that there is explanations on how to respond to the census in each one of these languages. And there's also a YouTube video describing how to respond to your census in these languages. Our paper form is only available in Spanish and English, and that is actually only sent to areas where we have determined to have a high Spanish-speaking population. So not everyone would receive the bilingual mailings, only those areas that have a large Spanish-speaking population. Next slide. Also, just so you know, we have had to recruit thousands of people to help us with this effort. Most of our recruiting efforts are complete, but we are still accepting applications. So if you would be interested, you could go to 2020census.gov/jobs to apply for a job with the census. Most of those jobs are enumerators, which typically looks like it's a door-to-door operation, which we will talk about a little bit in the COVID-19 updates. So due to COVID-19, the census had to extend its timeline. So because it's in the Constitution, we had to put in a request to Congress, and we are still waiting for the official approval. But essentially, that request asked for a 120-day extension. And so originally, the self-response phase, everyone could respond to the census through July of 2020. And that has been extended through through October 31st of 2020. So that gives us some extra time to encourage people to respond. And then additionally, that non-response follow-up. So that's anyone who didn't respond online or by phone or using their paper form. We have those enumerators who would typically go door to door to collect that census information. And originally they were scheduled to start going door to door on May 13th. That has been delayed until August 11th. And that is also being reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So each location where we will be having staff going to collect data from individuals, it will be done on each location. It will be following those guidelines for the Census Bureau.
You only do one, okay?
So, for example, there are parts of upstate Maine and Vermont that have folks who do not receive their mail to their home. They might have a PO box or live in a very remote location.
I don't know.
Sorry, Carly, just I don't mean to interrupt. Could you please
I
mute your line?
will be coming.
Excuse me.
I'm meeting.
Can you please mute your line? If we're, except for Carly, we need everyone to mute their lines. I apologize. Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Carly.
Yeah, no, thanks. So in upstate Maine, there are parts of there are locations where people do not receive their mail to their home. They either have PO boxes or they live in a very remote area. And we actually have to hand deliver their census invitation to respond in person. And that was originally supposed to start essentially on March 12th. And because of COVID-19, all of that got halted immediately. So there are several people in upstate Maine that have not even received an invitation to complete their census. So that operation has resumed as of last week. So there are, each location, each state, we are reviewing the guidance for COVID-19 and determining how to move forward with that. Right now, our door-to-door enumerators are, if you know of someone who did apply and got offered a job, they are still hired. We have not done any of the training yet because due to COVID-19, but they are hoping to get that started up again at late June and early July. And that training has been significantly modified due to COVID-19. So originally it was going to be a full day of in-person training and then some at-home work followed by another full day training about a week later. And now almost all of the training has been put onto podcasts for people to be able to do from their home. And they do still have to come in person. They'll be doing that in small groups to complete their paperwork, to do their swearing in, and to receive their device for their census work. So that is also still in the works. and of course being monitored closely, not only by the Census Bureau, but following all of the local, state, and local guidance for COVID protection. So I think that's the main points. There's also been delays to group quarters. So some group quarters they had several options for how they wanted
Hi, Carly, you're breaking up a little
to
bit.
select that, and selected a different option that would include more of a face-to-face operation. The Census Bureau contacted them to see if they would like to switch. Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So any group quarters facility that did not select the electronic response, we contacted them to see if they would like to switch to that due to COVID-19 concerns. And I think a lot of facilities have considered that. That operation has also been extended through, I believe, September 2nd. Providing their data to the Census Bureau through the e-response process, and others will be soon as our field operations get back up and running in the next few weeks. So, so even though we don't have field people out in the field right now, our office for field staff has also been closed, and we're slowly increasing the number of people who are coming into the office to try to get our field operations back up and running. So yeah, that's about the extent of the COVID-19 schedule impacts that I have for you. And then, yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Ellen.
Sorry, hold on.
No, that's all right. So the other thing that we have is, well, so this is a tool that I have mentioned before. It's called Roam, and it is a map. It's available to the public, and you can select each one of these shapes as a census tract, and you can select that tract and get all of the socioeconomic and demographic information about that area. And the darker shaded areas are areas that we expected to have a lower self-response, places where we were going to see more people not responding to the census on their own. And so that's where we really focused our efforts initially, to get partners engaged to help us promote the census and educate people about the census. And that's still, I would encourage anyone to go on there. It's still very interesting. But then on the next slide, we have another tool now that is available for to see our response rates. Sorry. So we have so here, the self-response rate map. So this also is a public tool, and it is, again, another map, and the different shaded areas show you how many households have responded to the census already. And so nationally, we are at 59.8% of US households have responded to the census as of May 20th. So a couple days ago is the latest data that's been released. Massachusetts response rate is at 62% even. And then you can go on to this tool and you can look up your local community. So you can look up your town, your city. This map is showing Boston, but it's delineated by census tract. So that's a tool that the census uses. And each one of the tracts is average about 3,000 people. Very. So you can your response rate than the right now. And it is one of the harder to count places in the country. And we knew that going into the census, and COVID-19 has definitely also impacted census response, particularly in the Boston area. There's but Massachusetts overall is doing really well. And I would say that people in the Census Bureau are pleased with the response rates that we have seen taking into consideration COVID-19. So we're getting there, but we still kind of have a long road ahead of us. And so we are still encouraging people to talk about the census, share it with their friends, make sure their neighbors and family members have responded to the census. And if you have any way, I know that the ARC has been very, very an active participant in doing some promotion for the census on their social media, and then obviously including me on things like this. So yeah, we're still working on it, and we have until the end of October to get those responses in. So that kind of wraps it up, I think. What's next? I think the next slide just talks about our, we have a data dissemination program as well, which I've mentioned before, but that's really helpful for people.
She keeps breaking up.
Forms and
Yeah, sorry, Carrie, you're breaking up a bit again.
yeah, sorry, I'm not sure what the problem is.
I know you're coming in and out, so I can hear you now.
Okay, well, I'm pretty much done. So if we want to take questions, we could do that.
Okay,
I did have a question.
all right.
This is my question is I had a question about the social services that you said are tied to the census, like from HHS or like block grants and things like that. My question is a lot of that stuff is allocated on a yearly basis, and I think it has something to do with the population. Does it all go back to the census from the previous census, or are there other things that come into account in determining those yearly allotments?
So I can't speak to each kind of, I think different programs do different things, but primarily all of those programs do rely heavily on the decennial census. So moving forward for the next 10 years, they will look at the 2020 census as the numbers to use for their population factors.
Even with something that happens yearly?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions? You can write it in the chat box if you'd like. So Carly, you were breaking up a little bit during the group quarters part, and I just want to make sure that everybody heard that. I mean, essentially, it doesn't matter if like, for instance, if you had a relative that was in a group home and they moved out of that group home in April or March, they're still supposed to be counted. If that group home was counted in a group quarters enumeration process, they're still counted that way, correct? Even if they've been home with you since mid-March or April, because the majority of the year they're living in the group quarters.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that. Yes, people still, even if they've been temporarily displaced due to COVID-19, they still need to be counted where they live and sleep most of the time, or where they would have been living and sleeping on April 1st. So that, yes, for people who were in group homes, who relocated back to maybe their parents' home or something like that, they should be counted in their group home. Same for college students. We need to have all the college students counted where they live and sleep most of the time and where they would have been on April 1st. So this has been definitely one of our bigger challenges due to COVID-19. But yes, most group quarters facilities, it's not as big of an issue. because we are working directly with the administration of those facilities and talking with them about collecting their data for who was living and sleeping there most of the time leading up to COVID-19 and who would have most likely been there on April 1st.
Okay. We have a question in the chat box from Rosa Reich. What are the safety precautions for census takers? As in, how are they going to people's homes during this time? Is it thought that people will be receptive to having strangers into their home that may be carrying the virus?
Yeah, those are great questions. So we will be following any, local or state procedures related to, face coverings and things like that, sanitation. I think at the end of the day, there is still going to be a door-to-door operation. And I think it will be a challenge because, yeah, people are going to be, more reluctant to answer the door due to COVID-19. So that's another reason why we're really trying to find every possible way to reach people and let them know that, you can do this now. It's easy. You can do it in the safety of your own home. And then you won't have to deal with anyone visiting your home to collect census data. But I think it's still a work in progress. It's still a few months away for our door-to-door operation to begin. So, I think we're just taking in all of the information that we can get until that point, and we'll be making the best decisions at that time to move forward. I see another question in the chat. How do we determine the response rates? So every household that responds to the census, we generally know how many households there are in each census tract. And so based on how many addresses there are in that census tract and how many invitations we sent out. And then every time we get a census response, whether it's online, by phone, or paper, we count that as a household counted and mark that, against the total number of households in a census tract. And so that's how we determine the rate. So then accumulatively, we take all the census tracts in, a city or a town, and that would, we, combine them to give you the response rate for a town or a city, and then take all of those for the response rate for the state, and then cumulatively for the whole United States.
All right, thank you. It looks like we're a bit over time. So I'm going to end here and thank Carly.
I had one question.
Oh, okay. Do you want to ask a question, Carly?
Excuse me, I had one question.
Okay. Go ahead.
But I didn't be here. I'm wondering if deaf with limited language are contacted with their sign language by phone and or door to door about the census.
Sorry, the question is about those that are deaf or blind?
Deaf with limited language.
Yes.
And are they contacted by phone, sign language interpreter phone? It wasn't listed among the other languages. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
If door to door, are they contacted by somebody who knows language? They are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if they are contacted on the door-to-door operation, and the person who visits their home cannot communicate with them, then they will mark that in their notes that a person who speaks sign language will be the next person to visit that home to try to complete the census information that way.
Okay, and by phone, because the phone interpreting is the easiest for them.
I would have to look into.
I think there is a video that's on the census. It's on the census website that shows a video guide to completing the census.
online.
Super.
Yeah, there is
Pass that on.
ASL video online on how to complete the census. I don't know about the calling exactly, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
Sorry for my IT issues today, everyone. I appreciate you being patient.
No, it's not, it's not your fault. It happens all the time. But thank you so much for joining, Carly. We really appreciate it. This is really
Yeah.
a lot of great information. And this is the contact information if you have questions. And then, of course, that you can reach out to the ARC of Mass for any questions on the census too.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone has a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Weather's great, so I hope you make it outside today. Thank you again. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.